In these last few weeks since the election, I've been seeing people, mainly media pundits and some within the Democratic Party, take the completely wrong lessons from Kamala's loss. She lost because of wokeness. She shouldn't have ran a radical left campaign, and therefore, we as a political party must shift even further to the right. To anyone who actually thinks this, what fucking version of reality do you live in? When it comes to identity politics on the campaign trail, she hardly, if ever, mentioned that she is a woman of color, when she could have easily went hard on that. I could be your first female president, and on top of that, I am not white. Unfortunately, a lot of this country's electorate is deeply misogynistic and racist. And if she did indeed run on that still would have sunk her campaign, not to say if this country wasn't so misogynistic and racist, that's all her campaign should have revolved around. I'm just pointing out how we're still so backwards in many ways. Anyway, when it comes to immigration, one of the key issues of this past election cycle, she was pretty much a diet Trump. She too ran on we need to close the border and end this influx of migrants bringing crime and drugs into our country, and continue to fuel bigotry against migrants who overwhelmingly come here because they just want a better life. And tell me, why would Joe from Indiana, who has probably never even fucking met an immigrant in his life, but still hates them with every fiber of his being, vote for someone whose rhetoric isn't all that distinguishable from Trump when it comes to the border and migrants? But the way said rhetoric is packaged may not be as abrasive as Donald Trump would be when talking about these issues. When, they could just vote for Donald Trump, who has been as abrasive on these sorts of issues as they have been for nearly 10 years at this point. Or what about trans issues? That was hardly brought up at all during Kamala's campaign, likely because Kamala herself and her campaign team thought that stressing trans rights are human rights and that trans rights would be protected under a Kamala administration would be electoral poison. When it doesn't have to be that way, you don't have to sit on the sidelines with your hands up in the air and allow Republicans to completely dominate discourse surrounding trans people and LGBT people as a whole. And look where that strategy has gotten you. You're now in a place where you feel that if you loudly support a marginalized group of people, that would cost you electorally because the Republican Party and right-wing talking heads have gotten into the ears of so many people in this country, telling them that trans people are out to get their kids. They want to use bathrooms that correlate with the gender they identify as rather than the one they were assigned at birth, solely because they want to peep on strangers and children and sexually assault people. While you provide no adequate pushback to this whatsoever, here are the Republicans galvanizing their base by tapping into and reaffirming their bigotries, while you excite no one and think people will come flocking towards you because you posture yourselves as the quote-unquote reasonable party, or you just acquiesce to the Republicans and go like, you know what, you're right, we hate migrants too. And because you have pretty much monopolized culture war discourse, mainly because we have done fucking nothing to counteract this, we'll also shut up about trans people and treat them as if they're a liability. Look at the Sarah McBride situation. She's going to be the first openly trans person in Congress. Unfortunately, she's also a Zionist funded by AIPAC, but that's a whole separate thing. And Nancy Mace, another representative from South Carolina, has been attacking her non-stop these last few days. Literally, she's posted hundreds of anti-trans tweets in the span of only a few days. She drafted a bill that would bar anyone from using a bathroom that does not correspond with the gender they were assigned at birth at the Capitol. And Sarah McBride, in response, was like, okay, I'll comply. And you have hardly any Democrats in Congress besides, like, AOC. She's the only one that pops into my mind at the moment, calling out how disgusting and frankly stupid this whole thing is. And this is my problem with the Democratic Party. They lay down and take all of the punches hurled at them from the Republican Party. And you may say, realistically, what can Sarah McBride do? She's already in enough risk just simply being a trans congresswoman. The Republicans are now going to have the House, the Senate, the presidency. She'd be putting herself in even more risk by defying this bathroom bill. I'm more mad at the Democratic Party as a whole for setting the stage for this bullshit. They are so deathly afraid of appearing quote-unquote uncivilized that they'll allow the Republican Party to be as unhinged as possible, and hoping that the Republican Party's untethered extremism will make people go flocking towards the Democrats. Well, this election has proved that that strategy does not fucking work at all. Your average median voter may be like, well, the Republican Party may be crazy, but at least they stand for something. I may not care about this trans stuff, but at least they say they'll cut my taxes and lower the price of my eggs. When Democrats should absolutely capitalize on the fact that Republicans have nothing to bring to the table besides culture war bullshit, because they know their real policies are not that popular. Let's provide more tax cuts for the rich. Let's implement tariffs that would raise prices on imported goods for the consumers. Meanwhile, the Democrats run a campaign that's just, we're not Trump, we're not the Republicans, but at the same time, we'll run a diet Republican campaign and cede ground with the Republicans on a key issue among voters this past election cycle, that being the border and migrants. You didn't entice undecided voters by trying to outright, quote-unquote, the Republican Party on issues they normally fixate on. And yet some people have the idea that the solution for the Democratic Party is to move even further to the right and become basically indistinguishable from the political party that much of its voter base doesn't fucking like, otherwise they wouldn't be voting Democrat in the first place. If you decide in these next 4 years that you want to continue this strategy of being more like the Republican Party, you're in for a ruder awakening than the one that you faced on election day. And you'd have to be on a whole different level of out of touch if you think this political party is anywhere close to being woke, quote unquote, whatever the fuck that is. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Bye-bye.